Remember we talked about Herod the Great murdering his own son Aristobulus, and Aristobulus had a number of children, but two of them in particular. And we've already met his daughter Herodias, who sets the context for a lot of our story. But he had another son, and that son was called Agrippa. And the custom of the Romans at the time was, in order to get the loyalty of the ruling people, they'd take their sons off to Rome in order to educate them. So Agrippa has gone to Rome and studied alongside Caligula, and Caligula and Agrippa are friends. And Agrippa, the grandson of Herod the Great, the son of Aristobulus, the nephew of Antipas, he ends up taking over power from Uncle Philip the Tetrarch when Uncle Philip dies. And Agrippa, he follows in this family tradition. He's hungry for power, and having taken over Philip's territory, he's hungry for more, and he really dislikes Antipas, Herod Antipas. In fact, it's probably fair to say the two of them were enemies. Remember, Herod Antipas had gone off with Agrippa's sister, and so Antipas is sort of supported by Claudius, and then he's supported by Caligula. You know, there's this political infighting going on between these sort of family members, all hungry for power. But he seeks to continue his grandfather's heritage, and just as his grandfather Herod the Great had tried to murder Jesus when Jesus was born, and we have the murder of the innocent babies, he follows in his father's footsteps, and Agrippa tries, after the death of Jesus, to follow his grandfather's footsteps by killing the followers of Jesus. And one of the things we know about Agrippa was that he met some of the disciples and would have heard the gospel. But despite hearing the gospel, despite hearing the good news from Jesus' disciples, is so transfixed by this power-hungry search. He follows his grandfather's tradition and decides to persecute the followers of Jesus who might threaten his power base. And in Acts chapter 12, we read it's this Agrippa, the grandson of Herod the Great, who has the disciple James executed, who has Peter arrested and thrown into prison. And he intends to kill Peter as well, until an angel miraculously rescues Peter in the middle of the night. But Agrippa, true to the Herod family line, executes the guards, because of their failings. He's continuing this bloodthirsty, power-hungry surge. And Agrippa coming to power, opposed to Herod Antipas and fighting all these, fighting for more and more power. He gets very full of himself. And in Acts chapter 12 and verses 19 to 23, we read that he's attending a festival to celebrate the Emperor Claudius, when all the people start going, well, yeah, Agrippa, you're amazing, you're like a god. And he goes so full of pride and so full of himself that the Bible tells us an angel said, enough is enough, and strikes him down. His pride leads to his death, and he gets struck down with sickness and disease, not dislike his grandfather who he's trying to emulate. Interestingly, Agrippa also has children who influence our story, and Agrippa has 3 children of note. One of them, again, he calls Agrippa. It gets very confusing sometimes when you read the Bible, because people seem to be short of names and call everybody by the same name. So you've got Agrippa II, and he's got a sister called Bernice, and some people sort of say it's a little bit of a suspect relationship between brother and sister here. Is there a little bit of an incestuous relationship going on that you don't quite know for certain, but certainly it's a little bit dodgy. And they have another sister called Drusilla, and Drusilla marries Felix, who's the governor of the region. Why is that important? Well, in Acts chapter 21, Paul, the Apostle Paul, gets arrested. Who does he get sent to see but Felix, who's married to Drusilla, who is the daughter of Agrippa, the grandson of Herod the Great. In other words, Herod the Great's great-granddaughter is facing up to the Apostle Paul. Now, Paul gets thrown into prison, and Felix, there's a transfer of power, and he gets replaced by Festus. And so when Paul is then invited to plead his case before Festus, who does Festus send for but Herod the Great's great-grandchildren, Agrippa and Bernice? This suspect relationship. And in Acts 25, we see them coming before Paul, fascinated but not convinced, and then agreeing to send Paul off to Rome. Herod's dynasty, Herod the Great's dynasty, this Herod the Great who the wise men appear to, who wants to kill the babies when Jesus is born, who dies in 4 BC, his legacy and his family heritage, they follow all the way through the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles. And they set the context against, the political context against which we're reading the Bible. And what we start to see is it's almost like there's this generational inheritance, a generational set of behaviours that follow through. Our hero, John the Baptist, he inherits his family's righteousness. He's filled with the Spirit before birth, and it has this prophetic nature to what he does. He's inherited his mother and father's righteousness, where Herod's family, they seem to inherit their father's wickedness. And there's a challenge for us in all of that. What's the heritage that we pass on?